Throughout time, people across the world told each other tales of how they came to be, of heroes and monsters, romance and tragedy, death and rebirth. Mythology helped shape the ancient world, explaining the unexplainable. This is Mythology Unleashed. Man-eating monsters lurk in mythology and folklore all across the world, but few are as famous and as terrifying as the Wendigo. Hailing from legends of the Algonquian and other Algonquian-speaking First Nations people throughout Canada and the northern Atlantic United States, the Wendigo is a nightmarish figure indeed. Although descriptions can vary between story and people, common to all these cultures is the view that the Wendigo is a malevolent, cannibalistic supernatural being, strongly associated with greed, violence, isolation, winter, coldness, famine, and starvation. According to mythology, the Wendigo is often a human being who has been transformed into a monster. Though the manner in which the gruesome transformation is triggered may vary greatly, some believe that acts of immense greed and selfishness were enough to cause metamorphosis. Acts of cannibalism, which were very possible during times of extreme famine in the remote parts of the frozen north, especially in the dead of winter, were said to almost guarantee a Wendigo transformation. Other methods include forbidden rituals, dreaming of the Wendigo, or being bitten by a Wendigo and surviving, not unlike modern tales of werewolves. Regardless of how one becomes a Wendigo, they are forever cursed to live alone in the forest, endlessly searching for human prey. The Wendigo was said to be gaunt to the point of emaciation, its desiccated skin pulled tautly over its bones, with its bones pushing out against its skin, its complexion the ash gray of death, and its eyes pushed back deep into their sockets. The Wendigo looked like a gaunt skeleton recently disinterred from the grave. What lips it had left were tattered and bloody. Its body was unclean and suffering from suppurations of the flesh, giving off a strange and eerie odor of decay and decomposition, of death and corruption. The Wendigo was said to be gigantic in stature, varying from 8, 10, or 15 feet tall. Some stories even go as far to say the creature would grow in proportion to the meal it had just eaten, adding to its insatiable hunger. Its teeth were ground sharp, and its digits ended in sharp points. Some legends say the beast's heart was made of ice, and that even its body was coated in ice. In fact, the Wendigo was so associated with ice and the cold that its presence was heralded by a sudden chill, or that blizzards would manifest around them. Some believe that the Wendigo is not a physical monster, but rather a malevolent spirit that possesses people and drives them to commit acts of greed, cruelty, murder, and cannibalism. Regardless of its manifestation, the Wendigo is a creature whose power matches its appetite for human flesh. The Wendigo has uncanny strength despite its emaciated frame, and preternatural speed that belies its great height. Its senses of sight, hearing, and smell, paired with boundless stamina, make it an excellent hunter. The older the Wendigo was, the more powerful it would become, as would its connection to nature. Some stories even say that the monster had the power to control animals and command the cold, causing blizzards or freezing victims with their touch. The creature's powers and appetite make it a formidable opponent, and some say that once it chooses a victim, their prey's likelihood of escape is nigh impossible. Even those who are said to have escaped the grasp of the Wendigo are left in a catatonic state or driven to absolute madness. Fear of the Wendigo, and the fear of becoming one, was deeply rooted in the cultures that told its stories. The monster lends its name to the modern medical term Wendigo psychosis, a syndrome said to create an intense craving for human flesh, and a fear of becoming a cannibal. This psychosis is said to occur within people living around the Great Lakes region of Canada and the United States, usually developing during the winter in individuals who are isolated by heavy snow for long periods. Initial symptoms include poor appetite, nausea, and vomiting. Subsequently, the individual experiences delusions of transforming into a monster and begins to see people around them as food. At the time, the most common response when a person showed signs of Wendigo psychosis was a curing attempt by traditional native healers. But should these attempts fail, and the individual began to threaten those around them, or to act violently or antisocially, they were executed. Reports of Wendigo psychosis date back hundreds of years. In 1661, the Jesuit relations reported that the men sent for the purpose of summoning the nations to the North Sea and assigning them a rendezvous had met their death the previous winter after they were seized with an ailment identical to Wendigo psychosis. They were afflicted with a combination of lunacy, hypochondria, and frenzy, affecting their imaginations and causing them more than canine hunger. They were ravenous for human flesh, leading them to pounce upon people, even children, like veritable werewolves, and devour them voraciously, without being able to appease or glut their appetite. This would eventually strike their deputies, leading to their swift and immediate execution. One of the more famous cases of Wendigo psychosis that was reported involved a Plains Cree trapper from Alberta named Swift Runner. During the winter of 1878, Swift Runner and his family were starving, and his eldest son had died. 25 miles away from emergency food supplies at a Hudson Bay Company post, Swift Runner butchered and ate his wife and 5 remaining children. As he had resorted to cannibalism so near to food supplies, and that he had slaughtered and consumed the remains of all those present, it was revealed that Swift Runner's was not a case of pure cannibalism as a last resort to avoid starvation, but rather of a man with Wendigo psychosis. Swift Runner confessed to this heinous act, and was executed by authorities at Fort Saskatchewan. Another well-known case involving Wendigo psychosis was that of Jack Fiddler, an Oji Cree chief and shaman renowned for dealing with Wendigos. In 1907, Fiddler and his brother Joseph were arrested by the Canadian authorities for murder. Joseph was tried and sentenced to life in prison, while Jack was granted a pardon, but had committed suicide 3 days later in jail before receiving the news. As the 20th century progressed, and the ideologies of Algonquian people and those living in the Great Lakes region began to change, reports of Wendigo psychosis saw a sharp decrease in frequency. However, the power of the Wendigo myth still holds power today. Wendigo creature sightings are still reported, particularly in northern Ontario, near the Cave of the Wendigo, and around Kenora, where traders, trackers, and trappers have allegedly spotted it for decades. In recent years, the Wendigo has become a popular monster and villain in the horror genre, appearing in novels, comic books, films and video games, often given a more beastly appearance than of what is spoken of in traditional lore. Real or myth, cautionary legend or deadly psychosis, emaciated demon or antlered monster, the Wendigo is a chilling concept, symbolizing the bitter cold, darkness, greed, and pure evil that may lurk in the darkest corners of humanity.